Guess what, folks? He's back.
You are Locked On UCONN, your daily podcast on the Yukon Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And currently, this is the most successful daily podcast on your Yukon Huskies. Do me a quick favor. See that little button on the bottom of your screen? Click subscribe. Helps our channel grow, helps our audience grow. And frankly, I truly appreciate all of your support. It's invaluable to me and the Locked On Podcast Network. For my audio listeners, if you have a Yukon fan, tell them about the podcast. Audio listenership is exactly where we want to go. YouTube is growing daily. We're super excited about the YouTube channel growing, but I really appreciate it if you have a friend who loves audio podcasts and they're a Yukon basketball fan. Send them the link, give a 5-star review. And finally, a special shout out to my everydayers. Thanks for giving this new Yukon content a shot and helping spread the gospel of Yukon hoops. Well, this is a show we've all been waiting for since all of the hoopla after the national title, back to back. We were all wondering, were we going to get Alex Karaban to stay? Who was going to stay? We all pretty much knew that Donovan and Stefan were going to go. So it really was going to be about, were we going to lose anybody in the transfer portal? We did not. Where was Alex going to go pro? He didn't. He came back. I was unfortunately at a funeral yesterday, so I really couldn't come on and do a live show, but I'm back home. Quick little turnaround and really kind of getting my mind wrapped around what this truly means for the Yukon Huskies and their program. Really what it means is there's a legit chance they could win 3 straight national championships, guys. It would be a historic opportunity here. And I think when you think about what Alex means to this team, he truly chose that ability to be the most decorated men's basketball player in Yukon history over a chance, because he would have gotten drafted, but would he have gotten drafted in the first round? Probably not. I don't know if he's here if there's 10 teams that said we're drafting you in the first round. So maybe there was 1 or 2 and he really didn't want to take that chance. And it's pretty awesome to come back to Yukon, get some NIL money. I know it doesn't add up to a hill of beans, but I bought my Yukon Karaban sweatshirt last year through the NIL store. So hopefully he got my $40-$50. That all adds up. I'm sure there's 2,000 or 2,000 or so more people that are doing the same thing. So it's just to kind of go back, he came back. He said he has some quotes, stores his home, let's run it back. The I'm back stuff, very Jordan-esque. But Karaban's return it's crucial for Yukon, for us being the reigning national champions. It's hard to replace a 4 spot, a 3 or 4. Danny calls him a 4. Who averaged 13.5 points, 5 rebounds. I think those stats you can replace, but it's the little things. He's such a key figure in the offense. There's a quote from Danny here. We didn't get good on offense until Alex Karaban got here. He said, whenever you have a 4-man that can process the game the way he does and keep your group organized and also has the clutch gene with a knack to make clutch shots and hit big free throws, he's a special player. And very Dan Hurley-esque type quote, because he was self-deprecating at first when he said, everyone wants to give myself and Luke Murray the credit for the offense. But then he said that, about how when Alex got here, that's when they started getting good. But guys, this means that there's a legit chance that they can do this. I think we all were talking ourselves into what life would be like without Alex Karaban with this roster. And I did a little bit of that yesterday. And now we don't have to worry about it. So this is just one of those days where I am sleep deprived apparently, but I am very I'm bullish on how this team essentially is Final Four or bust. I won't call this a lost season if they make to the Final Four and lose. There's still some questions about the roster in terms of who's going to step up, who's going to make that leap. But we're going to talk about this later in the show. But one thing that really needs to be talked about more is what Alex Karaban does from a processing perspective to get his guys organized. We just talked about that, how Dan Hurley talks about that. We did an entire feature set two shows ago about different play sets. In all of the different play sets and set plays that UConn runs, Alex Karaban is a huge part of why they work. Whether it's the threat of him shooting threes or his ability to fake screens and make people feel like there's a lot of misdirection when in reality it's just a straight kind of screen and duck to the hoop. His passing, he's not lauded enough for his outlet passes on deep guys running out, or the way he runs the floor. I mean, think about that 30-0 run against Illinois, where he kind of outran Terrence Shannon Jr. down the floor, got a foul, should have got a flagrant foul on top of it, an and one, and the beat goes on. He is the epitome of the music never stops. He reminds me so much of an old school Boston Celtics player, or we can kind of go to someone. I feel like he would have fit in perfectly in his prime with that 2015-2016 Warriors before they bastardized it by bringing in Kevin Durant and just had a bunch of guys who were doing, had their roles, right? And I think that's the kind of offense that he fits perfectly in. And here we are with UConn. I mean, let's not forget, this team added Aiden Mahaney. They kept Hassan. I'm really sorry for yawning, guys. Was up at 5 o'clock this morning to get on the road. Obviously brings Jalen Stewart back, Solomon Ball. Those guys are going to make a leap. I think having Alex here actually makes the prospect of Jalen Stewart and Solomon Ball making that leap even easier. I think it gives them a little bit less pressure to kind of come out the gates firing, right? So I think all of this to say, I can't see us being not ranked preseason number one. There isn't a team or a coach that you could tell me is better. And I'll debate anybody in college basketball about that. Bring it on. By the way, John Rothstein put a tweet out this morning, 22 weeks from Monday, we will have college basketball. So that's something to look forward to. We're going to talk about roster combinations coming up after this. Hey, everyone. I'm super excited for the NBA Finals. Imagine being there live. Feeling that energy of the crowd with the Game Time app. Scoring NBA Finals tickets is a breeze. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to tip-off. Browsing the app, I saw some incredible last-minute deals for the finals. The all-in pricing feature shows total costs up front, and it gets you a panoramic view from your seat before you buy. One game caught my eye. Lakers versus Celtics. Just kidding. The Lakers are trash. Soon to be Celtics versus Mavs, and there's deals you won't be able to pass up. Game Time takes the stress out of buying tickets. I love their lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal, they'll credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's Locked On College for $20 off. Download Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Okay, we are back. I know that there are some of you, Little Red, who do not like doing roster combinations, but I am doing something a little different. So this is the 24-25 roster as we know it. Barring any unforeseen issues going forward, we have Hassan Diarra, Aiden Mahaney, Solomon Ball, Alex Karaban, Samson Johnson, Liam McNeely, Jalen Stewart, Terrace Reed Jr., Jaden Ross, Ahmad Noel, Isaiah Abraham, and Youssef Singari. Now, there are a few things to talk about. Number one, when the coaching staff, whether it's Dan Hurley, if people are talking to Luke Murray, Kamani Young, Tom Moore, what do they love? And this is a phrase, you're going to hear me say this a lot, so I apologize if you get sick of it. Positional versatility. Say it with me nice and loud and proud. Positional versatility. So when people put out lineups and they have no idea what they're talking about because they're not aware that UConn does not care that Alex Karaban isn't a true number 5, or really he's not a power forward in the traditional sense. He's just 6'8". So they may call him a 4, but that's just a 4 in their mind. So look, with the exception of likely point guards or really centers like Terrace Reed, like Samson Johnson, like Yusuf Singari, everyone else can kind of do it all. And what I mean by that is they can handle the ball, they can make decisions, they can dribble handoffs, they can be in pick and roll. I don't think you're going to see Samson Johnson doing pick and roll with Yusuf Singari unless it's at the park or at a local gym, just kind of messing around. If they're playing UConn basketball, they have a specific role they play, right? So let's just get that out of the lexicon that Haas is up 1 and Aiden's a 2 and Liam's a 3 and Alex is a 4 and all this other stuff. They are going to do a lot this year. And so I did a few different roster combinations. So the unofficial kind of starting lineup, in my opinion, is Hassan Diarra at the point guard, or handling the ball a lot, bringing it up the floor. Aiden Mahaney starting as well. Liam McNeely, Alex Karaban, and Terrace Reed Jr. And the only reason why I have Terrace Reed Jr. in there is because I feel like he's been a starter in the past. I feel like once they get a cut of his jib, so to speak, they're going to like what they see. And they're also going to like that Samson does not care whether he starts because they're going to split minutes almost identical. So it's not a reward to start. In my opinion now, especially with UConn, with what they've created, it is not some big reward to start. It's an honor maybe, but just because you start, you may play 10 minutes, especially if you play like crap. So if you want to affect the game the way that you can. And I think Samson is mature enough to know that he is a better off the bench guy. You could say the same thing about Haas. I just don't think that they have a point guard that's ready yet. Ahmad Noel may change that. So the guys on the bench, another 5. Like these guys could start. Like this literally could be a starting lineup for a team that's an NCAA tournament team. Ahmad Noel, Solo Ball, Jaden Ross, Jalen Stort, and Samson Johnson. So now, not likely to see minutes. Yusuf Singari and Isaiah Abraham. Not likely unless there's an injury, God forbid. Unless there's some kind of change in philosophy, I doubt they're going to see some run. I also think Jaden Ross is kind of the odd man out if they go with an 8 or 9 man rotation, just because there's a lot of traffic between that 2 and 4 spot, and I think he can't play the 4 yet. I definitely think he can handle the ball. I definitely think he can play a wing position, right? So that's kind of traditional. Then we can get into, God darn it. See, I apologize again. Yawning. I'm a yawning fool. If you're watching this and you yawn because of me, I apologize. Small ball lineups. I think you're gonna see a ton of this, guys. We don't have Donovan Clingan. You don't got a 7'4" guy in there. So I think you're gonna see something of this effect. Some combination of Solo or Haas, Aiden Mahaney, Liam McNeely, Jalen Stort, and then Alex at the 5. And I think that's kind of be prevalent, especially if they're trying to run people out of the gym. Another small ball combo. Ahmad Noel, Mahaney handling the rock more. Solo off the ball. Jaden Ross, Jay Stu, Liam McNeely at the 5, giving Alex a rest, but still playing that, up tempo. Everybody can shoot it. I mean, guys, if they play this type of style, the last 2 rosters, every single person in the lineup is a 37% 3-point shooter or better. It's incredible what you can do against a team that's not necessarily that big. Like if you're playing a team in the Big East and they don't have a big bruising center, and even if they do, just run them out of the gym. 3s are better than 2s, guys. They count more, especially if they're open. And with this type of lineup, you're going to get a lot of easy twos as well, getting past your man, running the sets we run. If you want to go the opposite way, a bigger lineup, right? More experienced. Haas at the 1, Aiden at the 2, Alex at the 3, Samson Johnson at the 4, and Terrace Reed at the 5. Maybe that's something that, they toy around with. I know they did a little bit of that with Donovan and Samson in the lineup at the same time. I know my dad was a big proponent of that. I think sometimes if you're getting out rebound or if you just need a little more muscle, they have that. And then this one is one of my favorites. This would be the lineup of death, a la the Golden State Warriors circa 2015. So you take Ahmad Noel, your absolute bulldog, speedy freshman. You take Solo at the 2. You take Jalen Stewart at the 3, Liam McNeely at the 4, and Alex Karaban at the 5. And you just run, and you just 20-0 runs, 15-0 runs, 14-2, just to create distance. There's limitless combinations. Limitless. Great movie, Bradley Cooper. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Look, is it pointless to do this? Yes. If you know nothing about this team, it is absolutely pointless. Or if you're just trying to troll for engagement on Twitter. But I truly am trying to figure out what they're going to do with this rotation, because I don't think they want to alienate a guy like Jaden Ross. I don't think they want to feel as if Jay Stu isn't going to get minutes. Liam McNeely. Listen, for those of you who think that Liam McNeely isn't going to start, it's a valid point because he's a freshman. But 5-star freshman, in particular, when you bring in 1, not 6, you know what I mean? This isn't the super classes like, back in the day with Duke and Kentucky. When you bring in just 1 5-star, that essentially is, you're not giving him the keys to the kingdom. UConn doesn't do that. But you got to think that this kid is going to start. I mean, Steph Castle didn't start games at the beginning there because he was hurt, not because he wasn't, a 5-star that essentially ended up going on and winning the national championship and is likely probably the best player in the draft, to be honest with you. So I just think Liam is going to start. I think Alex is obviously going to start. I think the question marks go after that. Like Alex Karaban and Liam McNeely, put them in the starting lineup now. You could say this. There's an argument to be made for Hassan and Samson too, but they're going to have some competition, and they also were great off the bench. One guy won 6th Man of the Year. One guy backed up Donovan Clingan and had some of the best minutes in Purdue against Purdue in the finals. So you could go either way, in my opinion, right? Especially if Terrace is does well in practice here as we start, right? So let's talk about how real the three-peat is going to be. And the disrespect we still get from folks it's still going on as we speak on Twitter, from randos on Twitter, but also from the national media. And they may look at it and go, I'm not being disrespectful, I'm doing this. I'll tell you why it's disrespectful coming up after this. Okay, welcome back to Locked On UConn. Before we go today, I'm still basking in the glory of Alex Karaban coming back. As you can see, I have my breaking tee, UConn runs college basketball. If you want this same shirt or something like it, just check my profile. There's a link for this shirt on there if you want to grab it. I think it's like 10 or 20% off, something like that. It's on my Twitter profile at Mark Zanetto CBB. You can also follow me on Instagram at Mark Zanetto. Look, the disrespect that UConn gets from national media, from randos that are also fans of other Big East schools. I've even seen some disgusting people say, I hope Liam McNeely tears his ACL. It's like, dude, I mean, get a life. What do people say? Go touch grass or whatever. Wishing injuries on people is the worst. you're the worst type of person in the world if you think that. And if you're like, oh, I was just joking, well, then get funnier jokes. We'll leave it to the folks at Netflix. Like one caught my eye this morning. Again, I was traveling, so I had some time on my hands. Cody Mitchell does a basketball podcast, and I don't know. He's at C Mitchell Hoops. I don't know this guy. Great head of hair, nice beard. So I'm literally not making fun of him. I think I have no idea what his content is, but he posted this about 14 hours ago when John Rothstein said that Alex Karaban is returning to UConn per his UConn Twitter page. Am I the only one who thinks this UConn team is severely overhyped? Karaban, Mahaney, and Diarra as your top three doesn't move the needle for me. Creighton is the clear-cut favorite in the Big East. Okay. All right. I think what's interesting here is there's no mention of McNeely. There's no mention of Jay Stort. It's almost as if, and here's the thing that bothers me the most from these folks, and it's the coaching staff. And then I think he invoked that Coach K had, the recruits that didn't pan out and all this different stuff, because I think people went at him on Twitter. I don't want you to drag this guy. I don't really care. I don't like that. But my biggest issue is they just won back-to-back national championships, and they did it in dominating fashion. They didn't squeak by. They didn't beat Butler in the final the way other UConn teams did and a Duke team did, and people drag people for those titles, both Duke and UConn. They didn't squeak by and say, oh, what was the run with Kevin Ollie's team, the 14 team that barely beat St. Joe's in the first round in overtime, and had a couple of that wasn't a dominant run. That was just an incredible run, right? I have such an issue with this. UConn's team last year was the most efficient offense of the last 25 years. They won 37 games. And they return a guy who hasn't lost in postseason play, except for the Big East tournament. That it's in itself. You have three guys from this title team coming back, plus a top 10 recruiting class, plus the best coaching staff in the country. I can't say that enough. UConn has a coaching gap. I used the word chasm the other day. Very big, not big, but very sophisticated word that I don't use all the time. There is, because there would have been a chasm of leadership if Alex Karaban didn't come back. He's back. Do you know how big that is for this coaching staff, that they don't have to worry about someone stepping their leadership game up? Now they have it. Now it's just about the talent. And this UConn team is the most talented team in the country from top to bottom. You can't tell me otherwise. And the people who talk like this are the ones who, to give, I think his Twitter handle is at diehard UConn. This was great. Why do so many people willingly volunteer themselves to become the members of the UConn Twitter bookmark club? Is it a shame kink? I laugh so hard at that. So, dude, I have no idea if we follow each other, but if we don't, I definitely want to follow you now. But that's just so crystallizes, and it was off of this tweet that UConn's overly hyped. And listen, this guy's not the only one. Even a UConn homer like Rob Douster at Field of 68 has them at number 2 in his early top 25. How do you have the defending national champions who just got Alex Karaban back at the second position? I know it's not that big a deal, but it pisses me off because this is a guy who's a UConn fan. Do you not want to seem like a homer? It seems like you don't care when you do the live streams. And I'm not even killing Rob for that much. I follow Rob. I think he's, whatever. I don't care about the whole Goodman, Rob Douster stuff, but that still just is mind-boggling that he doesn't have them. So you're trying to tell me that UConn's team is less talented than Alabama's right now? Because that's who he has as his number 1. That the coaching gap isn't higher. Didn't we just beat a Nate Oates team that was pretty super talented with Mark Sears, who's coming back by 13 or 14 in the national semifinal? I'm going to give you the Shane Gillis. Really? I'm going to start looking like that. And same Gary Parrish. I know he's not a UConn guy. College basketball rankings, 2024-25 preseason top 25. and this is with updated to reflect developments. Kansas, number 1. Alabama, number 2. Houston, number 3. North Carolina, 4. Yukon, 5. Gary, can we talk? Like, let's seriously consider finding another profession, because this Yukon team, go back, just think about college football for a second. If Georgia had won a second straight national championship, did they win 2 in a row? I don't think they did. I'm not a huge college football fan, so if I'm wrong, check me on it. Cool. Georgia wins back-to-back titles. They bring in a top 10 recruiting class, and they bring in some transfers, and they got essentially, call it the quarterback, because that's what Alex Karaban is. They bring their quarterback back from their title team, and they're ranked 5th or 2nd or 3rd, or some places I've seen 10th. It's like, guys, Kirby Smart is a great college football coach. Nick Saban was a great college football coach. Could you imagine Alabama not being ranked preseason number 1 if they brought back their quarterback from the team? He didn't go pro. It makes absolutely no sense. It bothers me to no end. And for people that are like, oh, it doesn't matter. It does, and it also doesn't, because all it's going to do, right, is it's going to force Dan Hurley and his staff to lock this team in and say, again, no one believes in you. We do, because we run college basketball, right? And we do. There is no substitute for what Dan Hurley and his staff do on a daily basis. So you can bring in your big transfer staff, or transfer portal guys like Bill Self just did. You can bring back your little small point guard that I fit in my pocket, Mark Sears. I'm sure Alabama fans will love that. And listen, I live in North Carolina. I'm sure Hubert Davis will have a good team. They're not going to be better than UConn. They're just not. And if you put Hubert up against Dan Hurley as a coach, it's not even close. It's not close. So if the teams are the same, Dan Hurley's up here, Hubert's down here. Who else did he have up there? Kelvin Sampson, I could see that a little closer, but you have to give Dan the nod because he's literally just won 12 straight games in the NCAA tournament. What are we even talking about? If everybody doesn't vote for UConn as the preseason number 1 to start the season, it's stupid. And I would love to say more words that I can't say on our podcast network, but you know exactly what I mean. It's a bunch of garbage, and UConn is the number 1 team in the country and will continue to show it. I'm not saying they're going undefeated, because there's a lot of things that need to happen, but this team will be there at the end of the year. They will be a legitimate three-peat contender. It is 100% real possibility. And I find it ironic, and the world works in weird ways. We just had the passing of the great Bill Walton. His team was the last to do it, have a three-peat. I think we may see that again with Alex Karaban and his crew. Look, this has been another episode of Locked On UConn, but before we go, I'd like to remind you guys that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on the Amazon Fire TV channels app. On Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app, Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows. Find Locked On Sports Today now and available on the free Fire TV channels app. This has been another episode, and a fun one, of Locked On UConn. I'm your host, Mark Zanetto, asking you to stay locked on, stay locked in, stay connected. Make sure your toughness meter is always rising. And as always, go Huskies.